everybody, and welcome to Westeros.org's coverage of House of the Dragon. And we have reached the final episode of Season 2.
Long episode.
Very long episode, very long recap coming up.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. So this episode opens with Tywin Lannister, who, if you'll recall, had been sent off to deal with the Triarchy to convince him to join an alliance, and that's what we see him doing, tweeting with the captains. Their final offer is that they want the Stepstones after the war, and they'll discharge a tax, so like a nice little fee for crossing safely. And Tywin thinks he'll get hanged for it, but sure. Then they say, well, there's one more thing. You have to convince the commander of our fleet, Rocco Lohar, because men are very loyal to him. And Admiral Lohar, we're told, is eccentric and insists he will only sail with a man who can best him. He is an interesting character. We'll talk more about him.
Eccentric is definitely the word.
Yeah, well, they're borrowing something from another character, but yeah.
And back in Westeros, Vargar and Aemon are looking down upon the destruction that they rained down upon a town at the tip of a peninsula, a place that we have not seen before.
No, we'll learn about it soon. In King's Landing, Larys informs the king he has to ready himself. He needs to flee King's Landing, because Rhaenyra now has 3 new riders for her dragons. Aegon says that he can't, and Larys replies, well, Aemon fought the same, but he ended up fleeing in terror when he saw him, to which Aegon says, well, his brother deserves no less. Yeah. We learn what place was burned by Aemon. In his fury, he unleashed Valgar on Sharp Point, seat of one of Rhaenyra's supporters, Lord Bar Emmon. I always found that a very interesting name, Bar Emmon. It's very unusual in Westeros.
Very unusual.
Aegon still refuses to flee, and Larys says Aemon will kill him otherwise. And Aegon argues for taking his throne to seize his brother as a prisoner. He says, well, then who's going to defend you without Valgar? And then he says he's moved most of Harrenhal's wealth to Braavos, where they can hide and wait. But Aegon says, his dragon is dead, and he's burdened and disgusting, crippled. Even his manhood has been ruined.
Yep, popped like a sausage is I think the term. Larys insists that they can leave Aemon and Rhaenyra to fight it out until the people are so opposed to them that it'll basically welcome back Aegon the Victorious, Aegon the Peacemaker, Aegon the Rebuilder. Aegon then says, Aegon, the realm's delight, borrowing Rhaenyra's epithet from the first
He looks
season.
a little mad when he says it.
Yes, he's not particularly delightful.
In the Vale, we get one of a number of scenes along these lines of Rhaena drinking desperately from a stream, wandering around in the Vale, trying to find her dragon she believes is there. There's quite a lot of that.
Indeed. Have some comments on that later. On Dragonstone, Jacaerys confronts the oafish Ulf for his lack of manners and his crudity. Hugh seems quite embarrassed by Ulf's behavior, and he tries to apologize for his, fellow Dragonseed's lack of manners, and Jace lays down the law, telling Ulf that if he hinders their effort, he'll have him hanged and fed to the dogs. Ulf is not taking too well to being his sort of newfound station. He's delighting a little too much in it.
Yeah. Rhaenyra then consults with Corlys at Driftmark. She asks him about Adam of Hull, he says he's a shipwright who's been reported to be a man of integrity. But then Corlys urges Rhaenyra to strike while they have this great advantage of dragons, but she hesitates, hoping once again that that'll be deterrent enough and it can be done all bloodlessly.
Yeah.
But Corlys disagrees, writing her that besides Valgar, there's Tessarion, and Helena has Dreamfire, who's an old and formidable dragon. Actually, technically older. I mean, it is older than Vermithor, but not almost as big, but not quite. Corlys reveals he has renamed his famous vessel, the Sea Snake, to the Queen Who Ever Was, in honor of Rhaenys. He says whatever he does now, he does for her, and tells Rhaenyra that with his ships and her 6 dragons, they can crush Valgar now before the Hightower Lannister armies arrive. Finally, he notes, there's one more player, Daemon.
And Daemon, we see him at Harrenhal. Lord Piper, who no longer seems to harbour any ill will to Daemon, asking if pigs will do to feed Caraxes, and Daemon says that his dragon actually prefers them. Other rivermen make a point of addressing Daemon as Your Grace, and the sullen hatred from the last episode seems to have completely vanished, and we do find it a bit odd, this switch. I mean, Daemon is all cheerful now, and they're all happy with him. And then Sir Simon Strong informs him that Sir Alfred Broom has arrived, and Daemon says that with the Lannisters hesitating, he intends to march on King's Landing before they can react. And Broom asks to speak with him privately and tells him that he'll never serve Aegon. But Rhaenyra is being reckless, ignoring her counselors, and he actually urges Daemon to claim the crown. Daemon says he never took Sir Alfred for a turncloak, but Broom replies that at this moment they need a king. And Sir Simon is watching in the shadows and hearing this whole exchange.
Interesting kind of turn there of Alfred. In King's Landing, Aemon insists no ships could come and go without being inspected to avoid more dragon seeds going to Dragonstone. Lord Jasper Wilde, Iron Rod, warns that the people depend on the fishing boats, but Aemon just scoffs as well. Everyone has to make their sacrifices.
I think it's a little bit like closing the barn door after the cows got out, actually, because they've already got.
Are the cows in Swedish? Because horses, I think, is in English.
I may be confusing my animals. I don't quite remember which ones. But yes, something has gotten out of the barn anyway. In Helena's chambers, it seems that Alicent has now returned from her.
I find that it's just a strange sequence from doing her Ophelia thing and deciding to swim, and then suddenly she's back and no one's noticed. There's one of the issues of seasons, I think, is that they were planning 10 episodes and HBO told them you had to cut back to 8. And I mean, Sarah Hess says, without directly criticizing it, it's not like they wanted that. No. So I feel like there's a lot of things in this season that I feel like a little connective tissue that would connect things together had to be cut out to make room for the major points they wanted to get across. And then sometimes little details like that, like this, her returning or someone remarking on it, it seems so strange.
Yes, and she just
it's like she's never left.
No, it's like she's back from her camping, and Helena asks why they're now hated by the people, and says that she was happier before she was queen. Alicent asks her about leaving King's Landing, but Helena doesn't know where she'd go. And then Aemon enters, telling her that she must mount Dreamfire and fly to battle. We've been told that Helena doesn't like flying her dragon, in complete contrast to Helena of Fire and Blood.
Yes, I mean, obviously in Fire and Blood, after the death of her child, she is so grief-stricken she can't.
True, but initially she actually loves flying.
Yeah, George made a point of that.
But she doesn't want to fight and she doesn't want to burn anyone, and that certainly makes sense. And Aemon then grabs her arm and tries to force her, and Alicent intervenes, saying, unhand her, and he insists that it's Alicent's own weakness that has left them in this position. She pulls Helena away and tells Aemon that, he's trying to corrupt his gentle sister, and he insists their lives are in danger. And then he asks Alicent, didn't you want them to win? And she insists that not like this. So
I like a scene. I mean, there's bits of it that bother me, but I like the general sequence of it and this conflict.
The not like this way of winning is kind of symptomatic for a lot of the problems with Alicent and Rhaenyra. The whole bloodshed thing is
Alicent is then, we then see her at Grand Maester Royal's chamber asking for his help. She needs passage and his discretion. In camp, somewhere on the route to Harrenhal, Sir Criston Cole sniffs at the kerchief Alicent gave him as a favor, and Gawain shows up, sword drawn, pointed at him, saying, you must think nothing of your oaths. He knows what's going on. Cole says, well, I think of nothing else. I know, you're sleeping with Alicent, Gawain says, a man of Dornish blood of lowly roots, and he's disgusted by it. He threatens to send him to the wall, but Cole points out that the realm would then learn of the king's mother and his hand having been lovers. Cole says she saved his life twice, and says he's the beacon she follows. Mm-hmm. Then he admits he still has shame, but his desire for women has brought him many griefs.
He also questions whether his fellow Kingsguard are really all that celibate, and wonders if, in truth, maybe all men are corrupt and honor is just an illusion, which Gawain calls a very bleak philosophy. Yeah. And Cole says that his only philosophy before was to protect the righteous and dispense justice, but having seen the dragons dance made him realize that, they're nothing to them. He's very pessimistic now. They march to annihilation, and he thinks dying will be a relief, and this quite shocks Gawain into silence, so he just sits there as Cole turns back to cleaning his sword.
A really good scene, actually. Yeah. I think possibly one of my favorites of this episode, and it's such a really interesting insight into the character. Well acted, of course. Freddie Fox is fantastic as an addition, I think, as Gawain.
I mean, we've seen the change in him as well.
He's become a little more serious.
More serious, more sober. and Cole really, pointing out we're so insignificant when in the face of the dragons.
We go now back to Essos, or to the Stepstones, where Thailand is wrestling in the pool of mud of Sirocco as everyone watches.
Must have been wonderful, the actors.
Yeah, including Laseni Mirish pirates with dyed hair, brightly dyed colors. So they really finally, brought that part of it. I mean, George said he wanted the colors back, and they definitely did that. He's nearly beaten by the Admiral, who only lasts when he escapes him, and then he finally gets the better of Lohar, who says, "Oh, I'm impressed, and yes, I'll sail my fleet with you."
Dragonstone, Jace is sulking again, not to say, reading some random text, and Bela tells him not to pout, and he needs to get over his anger. And he's still on the whole that if any commoner can ride a dragon, what does that make us? And she says that he's hardly the first noble heir who's not the son of his noble father, and tells him to prove that he's worthy by taking his place at Rhaenyra's side. So
then we see Rhaena in the veil, shivering in the cold sun. Yes. What a contrast between prove you're worthy, and then here she is like, I'm trying. I'm trying. Then we're back in Essos again, where Thailand is singing quite poorly a sailing song of Westeros for the pirates. Poorly, I would say. Yeah, and Lohar leads the pirates to applause, and he says he's really impressed, and of course I'll sail with you. And then he says, we'll sail for Gullet on the morrow. Dancer starts to perform, and Thailand tries to leave, and Laura then says, well, you're very handsome. You've proven yourself worthy and your virility. He was chosen by Thailand. Thailand is a little uncertain.
Yes.
We'll get into that as well. Until Sirocco explains that he wants Thailand to bed his wives. Again,
all 4 of them.
Yeah, did he say the number? I can't remember, but yes, there's several wives or concubines.
I mean, he didn't say the number, so it got into my head. But yeah, interesting scene. Then we're back on Dragonstone, where Rhaenyra is dining with Jace, Bela, and the Dragon Seeds, and Ulf is still very, very oafish, has no manners whatsoever, and Rhaenyra tries to ignore it and tells them that, she'll make them Knights of the Realm if they serve her well, and gets into again that she had hoped the war could end just because of their existence, but Corlys is right, they have to strike, so they'll... the Dragon Seeds will have to learn their dragons and their commands, and then in 2 days they will strike against Lannisport and Old Town and their armies, to leave the Greens without allies. Bella is hesitant to killing innocents, but Jace says that, while hard, it's necessary to prevent the war continuing without end. So still have some odd people who think you can win this...
a bloodless war.
Yeah.
And it's a bit odd sometimes. I mean, they can use the argument she's not a trained warrior. She's not a... But it's just like, does she think is going to happen? Like, she has a dragon. What do you think dragons
it's going to fly over and scare people.
She went even and attacked
Cole, but she just scared them.
She just scared them, but I don't think if they had been too slow, would she have stopped at scaring them, you think? I just seem... And why she says Cole's not innocent. No, the soldiers, there's soldiers there who aren't...
Yeah.
I guess she's more objecting to the idea of attacking Lannisport and Old Town, I suppose. George appears and tells Rhaenyra, there's a message from Simon Strong. He fears Daemon means to raise his army in his own name. Rhaenyra calls on Adam to join her as she departs. I found that, I was really thinking about that. Out of all the people there, she picks Adam as kind of interesting. I don't know if it's a bit of foreshadowing. He is the most clearly 100% Team Rhaenyra among the new Dragon Riders.
Yes, and does she not trust Jace?
Well, Jace she does, but she may not want to put all the eggs in one basket, and she doesn't
want to leave the Dragon Seeds there without having.
Yeah,
Jace,
I think that's part of it. But Ulf,
she could have taken Baela.
Ulf, yes, that's the thing. Baela could have been an option, but I feel like by choosing Adam, this fits into some of the interview stuff that we get from the previous episode and some of the details. Like we're seeing her start to have. I mean, we saw her conflict with Celtigar, slapping him. We see her disaffection of Broom and such, and so she sends him away and tries to pretend it's just purely because I trust you. But with Adam, it's like she feels that he is 100% going to do whatever she wants, and so and there's Hugh, of course. Hugh seems reasonable, but is she?
He's unproven.
He's unproven, and also he has a bigger dragon. Is that a factor? Like she doesn't quite like that. So I just wonder if this is the choice of Adam is a deliberate kind of nod to like, is she starting to kind of have this need for a sort of cult of personality, a cult of yes people around her, after having for so long struggled against a cult of no people, basically. So I thought that was interesting.
In Harrenhal, Damon wakes up to find Alice Rivers sitting beside him. She's just sneaking into his bedroom and places all the time. She leads him to the Godswood, where he briefly sees a strange
Curious
vision.
figure, yes.
It comes and goes. It's a figure with antlers and hooves
Hooves,
walking
yeah.
to the Godswood ahead of them and watching them. He kind of takes it in stride. And Alice tells Damon that he has discovered that the world will not be governed and that he's ready to see the omens here. So he reaches his hand to where the sap of the weirwood seems to flow. And then we get this very intriguing montage of images. The white roots of a weirwood in a cavern, which is a figure enthroned among them. A figure with white hair and a raven-shaped birthmark spread across his cheek. It's a three-eyed, crow, raven, whatever. And then it flies out of there. And then we have White Walkers leading the undead, a dead dragon near a snowy peak, a field of dead bodies with a man walking through them who falls into the water and is pulled out of its depths.
It is Damon, yeah.
Yeah. And then a red comet in the sky, 3 dragon eggs in a fire, and a soot-darkened naked young woman sitting on the ground. She's seen from behind, and she has 3 newborn dragons in her arms. And then Damon sees himself approaching the Iron Throne, and Rhaenyra is seated upon it, crowned with her father's crown.
Wow, yeah. that was a lot. That was unexpected, and it was kind of. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I admit, like the one thing that sticks out is like Bloodraven. Like, one of the big moments for us when we read A Dance of Dragons the first time is we were reading it together over. We got it a bit early.
Yeah.
We were looking helping with the manuscript, and so we read together, and we read the Bran chapter together. When he sees the Pale Lord and
Ebon Finder,
and then we just knew like, oh my god! So this just seeing him, and I think back to, I forget which episode, 5th or 6th episode, where I thought it would have been cool if when the person turned back to Damon, but if it was a one-eyed pale fellow that he doesn't recognize, that we thought maybe
with a birthmark.
It would be cool if like Bloodraven was, but no, really interesting.
Very interesting. Although he does have 2 eyes.
He has 2 eyes. I don't know quite what that's about. I'd be interested. Maybe someone will ask. So he hears a voice telling him, "Hey, it's not hey, but it's all a story." and you're saying,
where we have heard that before.
And he turns to see Helena standing in the dark, telling him that he is, but just a part of a story. But now he knows what his part is. And then he's in the weirwood, but he hears Helena's voice telling him that he knows what he must do.
And then we cut over to King's Landing, and there Helena is standing on the parapet alone, seemingly talking to herself, and Aemon approaches, telling her that they share the same blood and that he knows she wishes to harm no one, but they must act for the good of the realm. Aemon emphasizes that Alicent doesn't understand because she's not a dragon rider. He asks her to come with him to Harrenhal to destroy Daemon and his army. Helena asks what he will do if she refuses. Will you burn me like you did Aegon? He calls it a lie, but she says that she saw it, that he burned Aegon and let him fall. Aemon insists that it's treason, but Helena said, Aegon will be king again. He has yet to see his victory, and he will sit on a wooden throne, and Aemon will be dead, swallowed up in the god's eye.
Very bold, some of this stuff. Helena's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Aemon says that he could have her killed, and she says it wouldn't change anything.
That's very interesting, and really well acted by her. She's otherworldly.
Really, really otherworldly, and I absolutely love. I have some questions about the previous montage, but the conversation with Aemon and Helena there, I felt like, wow, they're not afraid to allow prophecy and visions to actually reveal things. I mean, just calling back to Game of Thrones and how how the showrunners seemed very, very reluctant to allow
No,
such prophetic hints
sure.
early on to talk about what
Yeah.
was going to happen, because they didn't want to give anything away.
I mean, this fits. I think I've always felt that it's a journey. It's not a destination
Yeah.
necessarily that matters.
Yeah.
This season has not been not an unbumpy season, I think, but it's really bold of them, and I really think
Yeah. No, I
they're
was
embracing that.
I was thrilled by that part.
Then we're seeing Cyrax and sea smoke flying over God's Eye past the Isle of Faces. I think this is the second or third time the Isle of Faces showed up. And Craxus roars, seeing the two dragons approaching. And Rhaenyra sees the gathering army beneath Harrenhal and lands her dragon. Simon Strong greets her and leads her to her. He says she will see why he had reason to fear, but Daemon's army is being raised for him and him alone. Rhaenyra enters Harrenhal's great hall to see a huge gathering of men milling about and talking. Including at least one guy wearing with the shield of the Blackwoods. So when they see her, they grow silent, staring at her, and Craxus lands on the roof above. Really nice image. Then walks his way through the rivermen who part for him. Yeah, a lot of these riverlords don't seem like they have any hard feelings anymore, including the Blackwood guys. Daemon is now respected and kowtowed to. It's anyways,
a bit convenient, given it. Daemon approaches Rhaenyra, and it's a tense moment. He tells her that the army is sworn to him, and she takes a step back and loudly asks, "Who are you sworn to?" He comes closer to her and then switches to Valyrian to reveal that his eyes have been open. Winter is coming, and he has embraced the prophecy of his forebears. He's seen the dream of the Song of Ice and Fire, and he now sees that he must follow the true queen, Viserys' chosen heir, Rhaenyra. She seems shocked and confused by this complete reversal and doesn't understand it, but he explains that, in the end, the realm's only hope is in a leader who can unite it, and that's her. And he kneels, and she's greatly moved by it, and he tells her that he and the Rivermen are meant to serve her. He says they will do it until death or the end of our story, and the Rivermen kneel as well, and Sir Simon seems quite flabbergasted.
Yeah.
And Alfred Broom too, so...
they kind of make him look like he decides to run away, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
At Driftmark, the queen, whoever it was, again, remember that's the Sea Snake's former Sea Snake ship. He has renamed it. Is being prepared to sail. And Corlys stands alone on the docks, and Alan approaches as Corlys has summoned him. And Corlys tells Alan that they must set out on good terms together. But while Alan was asking him, he's just too curt, he's silent, he's distant. It doesn't inspire men. Alan says he did not ask to lead. And Corlys says, well, he's just trying to help him. And Alan finally says what he's always wanted to tell him to his face. And after all these years, Corlys just wants to help him with a reminder. Oh, be helpful. When growing up fatherless is near as bastards, ashamed, selling fish from dawn to sunset, to try and stave off winter, and then what it was like for him to see Corlys walking by with his heir wearing a fur cloak. He refuses any help from him, but this is a completely different Alan and Adam, and a completely different relationship to Corlys. I've tried to put out the book because there's a lot of stuff I feel like I'm gonna miss about the Alan of the book.
Oh yeah.
This is a very different Alan. Unless something's going to happen to turn him into more of that character, but I don't think so.
No.
But the actual story that they painted is really good, except the one thing I don't quite follow is why we have not yet dwelled on, why did he act that way? Corlys. Yeah. Marilda of Hull, we're told she inherits her father's shipwright business and then sells it and buys a ship, and then later has a bunch of ships, and she's a very successful merchant captain. And I was thinking about it, it's not impossible. Corlys is also providing some help along the way to help this. He wasn't abandoning him, but here they sound like he ignored them completely. Even Alan, who he seems to have some interest in, he seems to have ignored them. And we are not told why. We're not told, is it purely because a folly of, you can fill in the blanks, but it feels like when Rhaenyra and him were talking about it, Rhaenys and him were talking about it, they could have touched on why this happened, like when it happened, how it happened. it's another one of those things where I wondered, like, if we had 2 more episodes, would we have had that?
It also feels like it's one of those. Corliss has so far. Now I'm being a little ungenerous, perhaps, but Corliss has so far been one of the few male characters portrayed reasonably well. But now
We have to give him some negative trait
Yes.
here. I mean, the first season it was ambition for his family. I mean, I spoke to Steve Toussaint in Amsterdam, I mean, when I asked about Fulvers he had played, which one would he, he thinks Corliss tries to be a good father, but he puts too much on his children to advance the family name and to advance. So I wouldn't call him completely unalloyed good in the first season. He is an ambitious man who makes choices that are driven by ambition.
Yeah.
And that caused harm to his family. But in this one, they kind of say, and by the way, he has this other family that he just basically abandoned and ignored until it suited him otherwise.
And it's not like having bastards would damage his family name in Westeros.
Well, I mean, the whole question here is, in the book, he doesn't have them out and acknowledge, even if he may have quietly helped in things.
No,
because
but then they are born after his marriage.
Yes, and here I'm not sure what the plan is.
Yes.
I mean, these actors technically fall in the range of possibly being younger. So in that case, that explains that. But why not any quiet help or anything like that?
No.
But I guess it is maybe their mother died. He could trust her to quietly take the money and not tell her sons where it came from and keep them in the dark. Or he's just being an idiot. I don't know.
Then we get another scene of Rhaena wandering the Vale. But now she actually hears and sees a dragon flying in the misty air and starts running after it. So she got something to do than just wander around. On Dragonstone, Mysaria tells Rhaenyra that she's achieved what no one else imagined could happen. But Rhaenyra still doesn't want to bring fire and blood to the realm and asks who will pay the price for her claim to the throne.
Well, she lies in her bed later at night, and Sir Laurent of Kingsguard enters, and then she's being led into the library of Dragonstone, and there's Alicent. Now we know where she wanted passage. Yeah. I admit that we had to stop the episode for a bit there. So Rhaenyra shocked. Not the only one shocked. Alicent says no one knows she's here but her protector. I'm gonna guess it's Rickard Thorne. I don't think we see him, but Alicent admits she has been mistaken how she has acted. She explains that she knew how she was raised, to follow order, to follow rules, and Rhaenyra mocks her when she admits she has taken a lover. She does not name him. It's very interesting.
that would have been very interesting.
And Rhaenyra tells her, you're the one who clung to your virtue and made it your banner. And said, well, she acted mostly in resentment out of Rhaenyra, Alicent says. But as she's realized what she really wanted all along was to have a life free of plotting and striving. She wants an end, to take Helena and Jaehaera with her, to leave it all behind.
And go camping. Rhaenyra says that it is too late. Rhaenyra continues to be unpleasant to Alicent, who tells her then that in the end she believes that Viserys' love for Aemma was why he always supported Rhaenyra. And Alicent then offers a solution. Aemon is preparing to fly away to attack Daemon at Harrenhal, and Alicent will make sure that the gates of King's Landing are open to Rhaenyra, so that she and her forces can enter bloodlessly.
Yeah. Rhaenyra then asks what will happen to Aegon, and Alicent says, "Oh well, he's broken, but he'll heed me. He'll bend the knee if I tell him to." And Rhaenyra says, "No, I have to behead the usurper who stole my crown." And Alicent struggles with it. Finally, she just nods, accepting that this is so. I'm not sure it's entirely so. There is the wall. There are options. I mean, anyways, Rhaenyra tears herself over this. Like Alicent accepted dooming her son, but Alicent is sacrificing Aegon to end the war.
Nobody's discussing what exactly they expect Aemon to.
Aemon's. I mean, I think that's that. Alicent knows there's no saving him. He's
no, but also, I mean,
the idea is if
imagining how ugly.
He certainly is not going to just give up because gosh, you took my castle and sees my, you killed my brother. He will. He has He's the biggest dragon in the world. He will do bad stuff with it. So but that's a problem for I guess another thing.
Alicent says, Rhaenyra has changed and asks her to, let me go and do as I promised, and in 3 days you can take the throne. Rhaenyra says that history will consider you a villain, a cold and ambitious queen, and yeah.
But fair play, fair enough.
And Alicent doesn't care. Her only ambition is to be free and go camping. Oh no, sorry, to die unremarked and unnoticed. Alicent suggests that Rhaenyra should join her camping. No, and Rhaenyra says that her path was decided long ago.
Mm, yeah. What follows is this long montage, several minutes, I think, of intercutting Alicent leaving the Citadel, walking out of it, sending Rhaena through the Vale after the Wild Dragon. We see the dragon seeds getting armored. We see the Hightower host marching with the Blue Dragon to Saurian, passing overhead. We see the aged Northmen sent by Cregan marching across the Bridge of the Twins. We see Lords Lannister and Leffords, entering the Riverlands and seeing the Trident. We see Daemon leaving Harrenhal, seeing his hosts preparing. We have Tywin Lannister and Sirocco Lohar sailing in the stormy sea. We have Alan and Valorian armor being rowed out with Corlys to a ship. They're not really talking. And then at last, Rhaena comes across this brown, kind of mottled dragon, and some people say has vitiligio in the wings, and roars at her. Really love the design of that dragon. I love the way the barbs of his wings have these long curved hooks. They seem very.
What dragon that's supposed to be?
Well, that's obviously Cheesealer. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and then we have this very curious image that quite surprised us. Otto Hightower in a dark cell, waking to see torchlight coming towards him. Is this why he hasn't responded to Alicent? But where is he? And why? And then we see a cage driven by men wearing black, carrying ravens, and what seems to be like two men wearing white. And opposite them, Loras and Aegon in disguise, far from King's Landing. So this is a bit of an echo of Euron taking Arya out of King's Landing, but instead of killers as the unwilling recruits for the Watch, we have the two disgraced Kingsguard. And then the final images are of Rhaenyra and Alicent, and that's how the second season of House of the Dragon ends.
So changes. Let's begin at the beginning. Sirocco Lohar. That is an actual name from the books of a man, a Lyseni admiral, who leads the fleet in the Stepstones of the Triarchy. But Sirocco, we get some detail, but not a lot. And he ends up being here. He has been combined with another character, the very colorful Tyroshi Corsair Rosalio Rendoon, who basically ends up leading the Triarchy's fleet sort of after Sirocco Lohar dies in the book. But now by combining them, I have no idea what the thought is here. But and all the colorful details, we have Sirocco Lohar in the show, like he's got many wives and he wants worthy men to give him children by them, to sleep with them, and the mud wrestling challenge. They missed a bit. They didn't dye Sirocco's hair. Rosalio Rendoon had a purple dyed, I think, or some very colorful beard.
And he would also fight wearing dresses. And,
yes, he had this thing. Sometimes he would wear dresses, and there was a suggestion that there was. He's a very colorful person.
Yeah.
This sort of queer quality to the character, this queering of this character, is clearly part of what Sirocco Lohar is supposed to be, because to say he's eccentric, he is a he. That's what Lyseni call him. But Tylan sees, I guess,
like he's not quite sure.
He's not quite sure.
Am I supposed to be impregnating you, or
yes? Because I mean, the actor is Abigail Thorne. I've heard of them as previously they were a notable YouTuber called on the channel called Philosophy Tube, and they have moved into acting. In fact, they were actually at the same time as this. I believe they appeared in The Acolyte, the Star Wars show. I haven't watched it. I just heard somebody mention it. And Abigail Thorne is a trans woman. And I saw actually where she refers to Sirocco Lohar as she. Which seems like, is she misgendering her own character? Because her own character's gender is he. I don't know.
Or is it just supposed to be that
there is
Sirocco Lohar sees herself as a woman, but everyone around has just agreed that because you are our admiral, we will
and have wives
we will call you he. I mean, because obviously you shouldn't pull in anything about trans or anything in.
They don't have that language, so it's very different.
But obviously nobody talks about that when it comes to Rosalio Rendoon either. It is just
it's just they just speak of it as this weird thing, but he likes wearing dresses and
So
anyways,
yeah, they've combined
they
bits and
combined the
pieces,
characters,
yeah.
and it was interesting. I actually say I really like Thailand. I like the actor, and I like the scenes. Yeah, I like the scenes. I thought they were good fun. I like the pirates having the dyed hair.
Yes,
and
they were
everything.
very piratical,
Yes.
and Shorako Lohar was very, I mean, eccentric. Really, it really came across the as like madness to the
Yes.
character.
Yes.
So
I
that
mean,
was
they had the bit where says, "Oh, have you ever feasted on your
flesh of your enemies in
And
Thailand.
I
It's
said
like-
a joke,
I said-
ha ha.
and yeah, Thailand is like, okay, I'm in the den of crazy here. And then we have Damon's vision.
Yeah, we discussed that when they really embrace stuff.
Yes,
But,
but why does Bloodraven have 2 eyes? And
I hope, maybe we'll ask.
and is he witnessing this happening, or is where would magic showing him his future descendant, or what's going on? There's obviously some.
Yeah, I mean, he can't be the one doing it. Or at least if they stick to the book, Bloodraven says, I've never managed to communicate with anyone I can see them, but I can't talk to them. I can't do anything. So he doesn't seem to be the person causing this. Alice, I guess, seems to be causing it, but or is it, is it just? It's a bit odd when you think about this man. Like, who is someone doing this, or someone just opening the door for something that was already meant to be and was always going to happen?
Yeah,
this kind of touches into like George's vision of time in the series and how magic interacts with it. I think to James Hibbard and was it Only Fire Can Kill a Dragon, or whatever was the name of his book about about HBO. George has said yes, he's gonna talk and kind of explore the idea of like what does the time only run forward? Can it run backwards? Can what happened before be changed or not? So this is definitely part of things he definitely wants people to think about with series. He hasn't necessarily said what he's going to actually do or decide on, but obviously they could just be doing whatever they feel works best.
Yeah.
And of course, you know what? Why the 2 eyes? I bet is because Maximum Cito
yes, that's
had
right.
2 eyes.
Yes.
So I think maybe they felt like they couldn't actually have him lose an eye, which is a shame because he is supposed to. And as everyone knows, if you're oracular, losing an eye is a really good way.
Yes.
To
And then without that you can't have anyone saying that Bloodraven has 1,000 eyes and more.
That would be a huge loss.
Yes.
I mean, one thought I had would be like a weird one is like, is this not the cave beyond the wall? Is this High Heart or something? And that Bloodraven, before he lost his eye, had already kind of done some messing around with his stuff. So we're showing that, but the actual loss of the eye will come later.
Yeah.
For him, not necessarily for us, because obviously depending on how they do it. First off, the Knight of Seven Kingdoms, the Hedge Knight, they could somehow rope him in or show him, or they can just wait until they adapt second story when we should, if they do flashbacks, or starting with a third story. Actually, well, technically speaking, the first one, Dunk actually. No, it's the second one actually, where Dunk thinks that having seen Bloodraven. Yes, that's so. Yeah. Anyways,
now there were, of course, maybe we should just include this here anyway, since we're talking about the scene. I was surprised in a way that they decided to dig into the Game of Thrones so much, and
the White Walkers, the Dead Dragon.
Given that obviously not everyone or quite a few people weren't too happy with the ending,
the late season stuff. I mean, it's also interesting too because if you think about like the Song of Ice and Fire is about the prince who was promised, and like ending the vision on Dany seems to give us that like no, she was the prince who was promised.
Yeah.
And
except they
then
finished the story with Arya stabbing somebody.
It's
and of course,
there's only so much they can do to kind of retcon.
True, but I guess I wasn't expecting them to sort of double down on showing so much of it, And then of course hearing the story part. I mean, it doesn't bring back fond memories, and it's all story, and it's got the best
Yeah.
story. That wasn't something I wanted to be reminded of.
So, Alan, and the idea that he's orphaned and Adam
Yeah.
are orphaned. I mean, I said Marilla of Hull was a daughter of a shipwright, inherited a shipyard, sold it, bought a trading cog, what she called Mouse. She was a small brown-haired woman, was I guess known as the mousy woman. She was super successful. In a few years, she had 7 ships, and she is the one who brings her sons forward as dragon seeds, and kind of claims, Overy kids, and Corliss's. Yeah, that's exactly what they were.
Yeah.
And it's Mushroom who tells us, well, the other story is that they were his, but because Ian Lehner had no interest in women, but he had to stay quiet until after Rhaenyra was dead, otherwise, because he had quite a temper. Rhaenys, in my thoughts, I don't make the mistake, but when I'm talking extemporaneously, I guess, and she's Sister Dragon, and in fact, Adam, who's the elder in the book, succeeds. He gets sea smoke, and Alan actually tries to get sheep stealer, and that
gets his butt burned.
He'll have the scars on his back and backside for the rest of his days. And she is actually alive now in the book, and during the dance. She's alive after the dance. She actually plays a role in something. So it's kind of sad that we lose sort of her, but I understand why you have to cut.
And then we have Rhaena. Now it's quite obvious. I mean, people have been suspecting it for a while. It was rumored early on, and
Ryan didn't want to answer questions about it right now.
Nettles is gone. Her role has been subsumed by Rhaena, who also, for at least this episode, seems to have gotten Dany's chapters from the Dance with Dragons. Some of them, at least.
Where she's off. Yeah.
Yeah. At least she did not get diarrhea. We were spared that, but
I am confused by the choice. I mean, was this not what they planned initially? And so when they had Rhaena, because if I were looking at it, if I knew I could only have one of these characters, Rhaena or Nettles, I would drop Rhaena. And I know that George has plans for the character and her dragon in the book. She has a dragon called Morning, and it sounds like that dragon will not be appearing. And he has plans for her future, but while I won't get too much into it, I know, but what I will say is, if you read the books, there's really nothing, there's no lasting impact of that story that is obvious, and that they couldn't solve in some other fashion if they ended up covering a future period in a future show. That's someone else's problem. It's not Ryan Condal's problem. I would have dropped Rhaena. I would have had Nettles, personally. And nothing against the actress. It's just why you have 2 sisters and one of them does basically nothing until the very end of this. And
it makes me question 2 things. It makes me question, why on earth did we have to age up Rhaena and Bela to then end up in the problem that we have to give Rhaena something to do? Did we really
if they made them younger, it certainly would have helped.
Then you could just have had them in the background. You could just have had her in the Vale, and Bela could have had her a moment later on.
Yeah.
And we did not. I don't think we needed Bela. Yeah, it's given somebody a few scenes for Jace, but those scenes could have been used for other things. I really don't see the need for Bela. As in, I don't.
I mean, some of it, for example, some of the early scenes prior to episode 4 could have been Rhaenys and Jace talking, and Rhaenys kind of nudging and helping him.
Yeah.
It's just
because then he would have not had this problem, and then we could have had Nettles, and with Nettles gone, given that, I guess they felt they could replace Nettles with Rhaena in part because one of the stories that goes out is that she's Daemon's daughter, because they have a close relationship later on, I guess. And then now they're not going to have the problems that relationship presents.
To a modern television audience who might think, this young girl and
well, and also I think the fact that they are going to keep perhaps Daemon and Rhaenyra more
in lockstep.
Now that they have reconciled, they don't want to break up the couple again.
It can't last. I imagine they'll come up with something down the road, but I don't know. It just seemed like if I knew I had to pick one, I would have picked Nettles.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something about Reina that I don't recognize.
No, I think Nettles.
And again, it could be that they had already made decisions to have them in the first season, and it's like we have to continue with this. Maybe if they had 2 more episodes, they would have done some different stuff. But Reina would still have nothing to do if they don't give her something. So it's
it's a shame.
Wild roaming dragon. Maybe it's more of a dragon lore thing, but I mean, let's just say there is no wild dragon that has a lair in the Vale. This is a change to make it possible for Reina to get this dragon. Yeah. George had a long post talking about dragons and talking about how important it was that, if you don't stick to the world building, to the logic of the world, things fall apart like a house of cards. And in this case, he felt like, if dragons can just wander off, if they were nomadic, if a dragon could go from here to there, whenever it wanted, for whatever reason, and settle someplace else, like there'd be dragons all over Westeros. They wouldn't just be in Dragonstone and King's Landing. His idea is all dragons want a lair. If they have a lair, their territory centered around that, the territory can be expansive. Sheep Stealer would go as far as the Wendwater. Technically, it would say, the Sheep Stealer could go to the Vale. That's about the same distance. This is true. However, I think the problem from George's perspective is he has seen all the scripts. He has discussed this with the writers. He has no doubt. I think he has probably argued about this with them, saying, it's not just that you're having a dragon in the Vale. You're giving the dragon a lair in the Vale. It's not. It's been settled there for weeks or something.
Yeah.
If it has a lair, it doesn't work. It had a lair already. There's no reason for it to leave. In fact, at the end of the first season, Daemon mentions we have the 3 wild dragons.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is one of them. So I absolutely agree. I think a lot of people don't understand the thing. Nomadic means like you do not have a set home.
No.
You go from place to place. You follow wherever food goes. You follow a circular route based on the seasons or something.
Yeah. Migrations of the sheep.
Migration. You follow along. The dragons don't do that. They are territorial. They have a territory. They defend it. Yes, there's a dragon or 2 that behave differently. George says there are very special circumstances. I won't get into what one of them could be on one of them, but I mean, there are, I think, some very interesting circumstances for that one that make it kind of unique. Or people say, hey, how about Drogon flying off and flying around and for weeks? He's looking for a lair. We find out at Dany's last chapter, he finally found a lair in the Fraki Sea, and that's now his territory.
I mean, he was obviously not considering marine.
They want a cavern. They want some place.
So even this is I'm stuck here right now with Dany, but I don't see it as my territory and as my lair. So when I've flown off with her, well, I'll look for some place nice and dragonish to live.
So that's a big part of what George kind of was thinking, and I think his post is because like he disagrees with this. Like he knows what their intention is on the show, and he kind of argued. And there's like, George, but we have to do this, George, to make the story work on the show because we don't have Nettles. Like to me, the other thing is why send Reina to the Vale at all? Just keep her at Dragonstone. Just send the boys away. Yeah, it's sad we don't see Lady Jane, but we see her for 2 scenes and 1 silent scene. She has
very nice dresses,
beautiful actress. I kind of think they missed the beat by not having her lady-in-waiting, very close companion. Jane was clearly a lesbian. Not glimpsing her in the background or talking of her or kind of constantly shadowing her. Something to suggest that closeness. I find that weird, but like when they're even introducing things, like why not have one that's canonical? I had the same thing with like Game of Thrones. I think sometimes like why introduce this when you have canonical examples of this? Like, anyways, and
then we have a big question mark, I would say, which is Aegon repeating what has been suggested in previous episodes. My dragon is dead.
I don't know. I think I assume this is a fake out, but it seems weird. But no one said, "Hey, that dragon that was dying like it just vanished into smoke, or
Yeah.
it must have crawled off to die, or somebody saw it crawling off into the sea and to die, and or something, and it's not touched upon. Like if they have really killed Sunfire,
That's
now
a huge change.
that's a
I mean,
huge change.
it's
Now,
enormous change.
now in behind the scenes stuff, I think Ryan and others like, if the dragon is dead, or it's certainly so they seem to be leaving it open. They seem to kind of say, we're not saying it's dead.
I also actually would have thought. I mean, we see some examples of a kind of communication between rider and dragon. I always thought it would extend to the rider being aware of if the dragon is dead or not.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem to be the case with Aegon here, but maybe he's too preoccupied mourning other dead parts. Sorry.
So background, nerdy stuff, heraldry. Very fun to see some more arms of the Riverlands houses, and we see a quartered arm of a black dragon, and 2 quarters, and the other quarters are sort of a ring with eyes inside of it. These are the arms of House Vance of Wayfarer's Rest. They have a cousin branch, a cadet branch called the Vances of Atranta, and both of these families are. First off, the black dragon of the Vance of Wayfarer's Rest have, and the green dragons of the Vance of Atranta have, created long, long ago, back in the 90s, by George, late 90s. When we were talking to him, I think they were one of the first houses he actually had. Yeah. I don't think he created the blacks and greens just so he could say because of the Vances, but maybe when he was then say, okay, well, whose sides of who.
He might have looked through which
arms, and he the ones with the black dragons will go with the blacks.
So.
The ones with the black dragons will go black, the greens will go green.
Yeah.
These are references, both of these houses, to one of George's favorite authors, of someone he's called the greatest living fantasy author. He's passed away. Jack Vance. Jack Vance, incredible writer, 50s, 60s, I think 70s as well, probably after as well. But that was his heyday because he wrote The Dying Earth. And the arms of these houses and their names of their seats refer to various books, primarily referring to, I think, The Dying Earth. So Wayfarer's Rest refers to a character called Leanne the Wayfarer from The Dying Earth, which was a seminal 50s fantasy novel. It was like right up there with Lord of the Rings. It's really fantastic. And in fact, the golden ring with the eyes inside of it refers to the story about Leanne the Wayfarer in, I think it's called Leanne the Wayfarer in, or maybe Liane, Liane.
Yeah.
Who's this roguish character, not a nice fellow, who ends up finding this sort of magical ring that he can lure over himself, like put over, lower it down, and like, he'll be in this other dimension. And great, I can steal things, I can do horrible things, and then disappear and vanish. And until he meets somebody called Chun the Unavoidable, who has this robe sewn with eyes and human eyes, and he thinks, aha, I have my ring, I'll disappear. Well, it's Chun the Unavoidable, and he hears a voice behind him, and I think Chun says something about how your eyes will look so beautiful in my robes, and that's the end of that story. And the dragons all refer to the Dragon Masters, a science fiction-ish kind of story. The dragons, my recollection is they are kind of like scaled humanoid lizard alien people things, or maybe genetically engineered. I can't recall exactly. Not genetically engineered, but sort of created or something. I don't exactly recall. Not proper dragons, but they're called dragons by the humans, who are sort of. And then the white tower of the Atranta's arms refers to the last castle, another story of Vance's, and Atranta refers to Bad Ronald, a novel of his. I know that our website says the ring and eyes refers to the eyes of the overworld. I will get that fixed, because I'm pretty sure I have the exact email where George explained to me like what the arms were referring to.
And there are lots of little gems like that to be found. He loved doing homages to various authors, so there's some really cool ones to be found. And then you can go and read all those books once you've figured out what the arms are.
House Garner, one of your favorites.
Yep. The owl service.
So it's 3 owl heads on 3 plates. Owl service. Great, really memorable ending. It's always kind of like a strange, magical, very, very interesting. And then there's like Zelazny with House Rogers. House Castaigne in the Reach is a reference to Thomas B. Castaigne, the historical fiction author.
House Jourdain.
House Jourdain, of course, is Robert Jordan.
Dun-
Yeah. So a lot of cool heraldry, really cool to see that. Always love to see that.
Should we go into anything? I mean, we talked a little bit about Ulf and Hugh and their background, and
Yeah, we did.
people kind of latched on to the fact that Hugh's mother has to be Sarah, but we feel that there are lots of problems with that.
Yeah,
Because,
I don't think it's been set up personally.
no, because then Hugh really ought to be non-native to King's Landing.
He should have been born and raised in Lys or Volantis.
Yes, because Sarah, yes, she was Jaehaerys' daughter and she became a prostitute, but she would not have been a prostitute in King's Landing.
No. She ran off to Lys and then Volantis.
Yes, she was involved in all sorts of seedy businesses. She was a bit free with her favors and a bit getting other people into trouble, and quite a bit of ugliness, getting another girl pregnant when they were having a foursome with a couple of knights. Eventually, she's his drawing on Claudius and Augustus and his falling out with his daughter, basing it on the way that the daughter was described in
Robert Graves' novel,
yes,
and the BBC miniseries as well,
which I think is also drawing on Suetonius then, unless
I think
so. I mean, it's got the very scurrilous rumors about the promiscuous nature of that daughter.
I'm not just remembering the scene from I Claudius, where Brian Blessed is it as
Augustus
sees a room filled with men, and all the men who have slept with his daughter, and he's like staring at, and you, and you, but you're old enough to be her grandfather, and this is shock, and it's growing like this numbness over the fact that she could be so.
Yes, I mean, especially when obviously he, had this huge program about restoring Roman virtues and family values, and then
of course his sister Octavia was sort of the big sort of, he almost created a cult around her, the perfect Roman mother, and
so Jaehaerys is perhaps not quite as caught up in that as Augustus, but he is very disappointed in Sarah's behavior, and eventually ends up sending her off to a mother house, from where she runs off
to Lys,
where she decides to start selling her favors in a pleasure house, pleasure garden, still dressed as a septa or a novice.
And then from there, she took her earnings to Volantis, found her own fancy brothel, and eventually sent sons. Do you have her sons? Well, she didn't send them. They went to the Great Council to try to claim that why they should inherit.
Yes, but she would not have been a prostitute in King's Landing. It makes very little sense.
So they think he came from Essos, and there's some reference, like his wife keeps talking about going to Tumbleton where her brother is. Like, why not one line about how he learned the forges of Lys or something? And it just seems a little odd. I find it. I don't like it. Sarah works, I guess, but I don't care for it. I think it's. I appreciate the attempt to give a nice Easter egg. Maybe something more will come of it later. I don't know. But I think like a bastard of Jaehaerys, I mean, they can change. They can do whatever they want. Like, say he was the mother was a bastard of Jaehaerys, and he didn't take knowledge or what have you. Anyways, usually this is where we'll do dragon lore, but we kind of covered Cheap Stealer and Wild Dragons and George's stuff about them. So
they shouldn't be migrating around.
They don't migrate. They don't change layers except very rare circumstances. It's but so I think that we'll leave it at that. I have this vague impression we may have done like a overall season discussion video.
I guess we could say it was nice to see Tessarion.
Yeah, very blue.
Very blue.
Very blue.
The Blue Queen, as she ends up being called. Her first rider is Daeron, so she's quite a young dragon
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So obviously we'll see more of her next season, and all the other dragons that now have riders. Yes, I guess we should ponder whether we want to do some sort of overview. Perhaps if people have any questions that they would like us to touch upon regarding this,
that might be a possibility.
Season, we'd be happy to look into that. So until whatever next thing is,
whatever next video is, hopefully we'll do something
before the Night of the Seven
yes.
Kingdoms.
So we'll see. Thanks for watching. Till next time.
Bye.